I mean, we are in the presence of a celebrity right now. This is
We are.
She did the Super Bowl commercial with Bill Murray and Jeep.
That's it right there.
This is it. This is the one that started it all.
You planned that.
No, I didn't, but yeah, that's cool.
Could we be in line for something funny to come out of the mouth?
Just might happen. What a little cute.
She's the best.
Everyone deserves to feel their best. Everyone deserves to move their best and not have pain.
I'm a little upset that Ben got like 2 inches taller because he's already tall, dark, and handsome enough.
Culture is something we think about like all the time at Shrutis. You know, we're all coming from different cultures.
Our comments have exploded
Through the roof.
So there you go. All right, welcome back to another episode of Lancaster Connects. We're in our second week of the Ben and Jeff show being the full-on Ben and Jeff show.
We get 2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row, and we'll get that third week next week, and then it all falls apart again.
It does. Vacations, summer schedules. Summer throws a wrench into like everything.
Yeah,
schedule-wise.
But it's July.
Good break though.
That's right. Yeah, it is. But it's July 1st. It's halfway through the year. So all of those New Year's resolutions.
Oh yeah, like that was 6 months ago.
We're closer to Christmas today than we're not. There's that one. So
are you saying we got to start planning for Christmas?
Well, it's about, I don't know, I guess so.
I mean, there's those crazy people that start putting up Christmas decorations after like Labor Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know that we should call people, our neighbors, crazy.
This is true.
Ben.
This is true.
It's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Those
passionate Christmas fans.
Passionate is a good word.
Passionate Christmas fans put up lights after Labor Day.
There's a little crazy there, though.
I mean, if you think insulting our community is the way to success here, Ben, then go ahead.
You know,
maybe it'll just be the Jeff show from now on, and we kick him off.
I'll host the alternate crazy version of the show.
My preference is to do holidays in order.
I very much agree. So now is Independence Week,
Independence Day.
Right. Yeah. That's the focus for this week.
When we sent those English British people packing. July 4, 1776. That's right. Independence Day. Something came across my feed about that. Fireworks are big this week, right?
Yes.
And if you have pets, it might be a good idea to put them up in a pet hotel, right? Give you a little break, give them a little break. Maybe the pet hotel's out of your neighborhood, out of earshot of the fireworks.
Yep.
You know, just a thought. I thought that was a good idea. Actually, that is a fellow retailer friend of ours down in Florida that is doing a promotion like that. So if you invest in a new mattress, he'll pay for a night for your pet to stay in a pet spa. So I thought that was a good
interesting idea. They should make pet like earmuffs for fireworks. That's a $1 million idea right there.
Says somebody without a dog.
Yeah, this is true. But they should do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Keep the dog safe.
You're 0 for 2 on the show so far.
just leave.
calling our community crazy twice, and then pet muffs.
I think pet muffs is $1 million idea. Yes, Chris, coming through. Thank you, Chris.
It doesn't have the best ratings though.
Well, 3.6. It's better than halfway there.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's funny. We should get those. You know what? I think your penalty. Your penalty next week for calling the community crazy is you have to wear the pet muffs.
They not only muffle the sound, they keep the head warm.
I'm sure that's what happens. I'm sure the high quality thread from overseas
is the child wearing the same thing?
Yeah, I'm sure the high quality thread from overseas does a tremendous job of dampening the ear receptors that dogs have when hearing is one of their best traits. I'm sure it does the job.
This is just one of, I'm sure, many that are available.
Yeah. Boy, our guest is like, what did I get myself into? He's like, gentlemen, I bill my time hourly.
Acorn Acres just chimed in there with an OMG. I wonder if the Whistle Pigs have issues with fireworks and noise like that.
They're probably not. They're probably cool with it. Would be my guess.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
My guess.
Maybe she would know.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out from Betsy as the show progresses. So anyway, without too much further of this, because I don't know what's going to come out of his mouth at this point, right? Our attorney friend Bill Z from Apple, Yost and Z could tell us that you never ask a witness something you're not going to know the answer to. In my cohort here, right? Is that good lawyering? Is that right?
That is correct. Good advice.
Yeah. So my host here,
survive in that world.
He's just derailing the show entirely. So
I'm just glad I don't have to wear the earmuffs.
Yeah. Oh, wait, you didn't get those? We were going to crap those up. All jokes aside, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We are connected through Diana Volo from Swan for Kids, who's an organization that we love. We're going to talk about their celebration event later this month that you're the keynote speaker of, which is just fantastic. And we're going to talk about what you do there at the firm, touch on what you do, how you serve the community there, but really your passion around education and trauma-informed education. And you're a former educator, so you have a lot to talk about on this topic. And we titled the show "Helping Our Most Vulnerable Children," because these are kids that, through no choice of their own, have parents that have gone away, and they probably saw some stuff that wasn't so great. They've heard some things about mom and dad that's not so great. They live maybe in a different home with a parent, a relative, or maybe they're in foster care as a result of all this. And so we're here to talk about all of that and how your leadership on this topic is helping kids in our community. So I guess we'll start there. How did you get involved in this whole world of trauma-informed education?
Well, it's interesting. I started out as a teacher in the late 90s, and I taught at high school in Philadelphia. Actually, the high school doesn't exist anymore, University City High School in West Philadelphia. Prior to that, however, I've had some experience with adverse childhood experiences, exposed to caregivers who are incarcerated, domestic violence, drug abuse, those sorts of things. That sort of shaped my childhood, and it's really what made me want to become a teacher. Teachers had a really strong impact on me as a young person. It took a little while for me to get in my groove academically. Then I sort of became a perpetual student. But I was really focused on those issues when I decided I wanted to be an educator and try to be able to help students who've had difficult experiences.
Yeah.
Bill, Jeff referenced, and you did as well, the term trauma-informed education. What does that mean?
So it's interesting. It's sort of a newish concept in the education world, although I think it's got a lot of traction now. Really grown out of a lot of work that was done in the mental health space. And really, trauma-informed education is understanding the widespread impact of trauma. And when I'm talking about trauma, I'm talking more complex trauma, so not necessarily one traumatic event, but there was a study done in the late 90s. Two doctors, Anda and Filiti, were looking at this issue of adverse childhood experiences, which they broke out into 3 categories and had 10 questions that they used to identify whether individuals prior to age 18 had experienced these events. And those could be things like, again, having an incarcerated parent, domestic violence, sexual or physical abuse. And what they determined was there's this dose effect that the more of these things that have happened to you prior to 18, when your brain is developing, the more likely it is that you're going to have negative life outcomes, both mentally, physically, and just where your life is going to take you. So the idea of trauma-informed education is really making sure that the school system, which can be a source of re-traumatization, is aware of the widespread impact of trauma, recognizes those symptoms of trauma, and then responds in a way that doesn't re-traumatize individuals. That's really the focus there.
Yep. This is a topic that if you're tuned into education today and how the needs of kids today are changing from what it was from maybe when we were in school or when you were a teacher, this is something that's very much at the forefront. You've been a product of it, I guess, through your childhood, we could say, the reason you became a teacher. But we talked prior to getting on the show about where you feel trauma exists, and where is a trauma or is it a challenge, right? Are we challenging kids and relying, I guess, how am I trying to say this? Are we recognizing that kids need to be challenged versus responding to the traumatizing incidences that they've actually had? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we spoke, I mean, that was, as I mentioned, I sort of had some intuitive teachers that just understood some of those issues and really pushed me to excel where I could in areas and draw on my abilities rather than falling into, because trauma can really be, it's an intergenerational issue. It's something that certainly can pass on from generation to generation. So it takes the ability to sort of break away from that and to have people that are going to encourage you. I mean, one of the things that I hear from time to time, particularly when I first started doing this work with some schools, is, that somehow we are lessening our standards, or we are not responding to issues in schools in an effective way if we are looking through what we'll call a trauma lens. And really all a trauma lens is looking at and asking the question, rather than what's wrong with you, what happened to you. And I think having educators that are willing to do that don't engage in really deficit explanations of, oh, that's just a bad kid that's never going to sort it out, or from a bad environment, but rather, as you said, challenging individuals to understand why they are reacting in the way that they are, even from a biological level, because a lot of this really is, if you get deep into the brain science, what we're talking about is essentially a stress dysregulation issue, so that you're not able, because of what you've experienced in the world, to process stressors in a way that is adaptive, like a school environment. So you engage in maladaptive behaviors, or maybe you're withdrawing from school. So absolutely, to your point, I think it's really important that what we're looking to do is build resilience in students. And that's sort of the hand in hand with trauma. Is, we talk about trauma, and then what's sort of the spot that we want to get to, and that's that resilience, and that takes skill building, and that's again what trauma informed education is about as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's what you just said is so simple to hear. It's that shift in a question, one simple question: what's wrong with this kid, as opposed to what happened with this kid. I mean,
Absolutely.
Just such a simple shift. I mean, I look at my son, my youngest son, so we're a 2-parent home, right? We got one parent, largely at home mom, both involved in our kids' lives and supportive and all that stuff. And yet my youngest was home throughout COVID and the years after, and really, largely has a rough time speaking up for himself, on a number of topics, because he got kind of put in a box over here when all of his friends went over there back to school, right? And so now we're working out through that, and I remind myself often, well, that's what happened. So we have to remind ourselves as parents, like, we got to kind of help him along and build those skills of resiliency. But not everybody has the time to focus on that. Not everybody has the what's the word I'm looking? Adaptability, wherewithal to ask that question. Right.
Yeah, I think there's this sentiment too that resilience is this innate quality, and it really isn't. It's something that you can work on and build, and it requires the encouragement of the adults. I mean, one of the things that we focus on with trauma informed care is this idea that one caring, supportive adult can be all the difference for a student who's had really, significant experiences that have impacted their childhood and their development.
So, Bill, you're obviously no longer a teacher. You've made a shift into law, and you're a partner at Apple, Yost & Z. Obviously, you're the third part of that name there. Can you talk to us about the shift from teaching to your legal career, why that occurred, what prompted that, and what your firm is all about there?
Sure. So it's interesting story. So I started again as a classroom teacher. I always had the idea that I was interested in the law. I think some of that might have to do with some of the things I experienced as a young person, and involvement maybe on the other side of things from some of my family with the legal system. I actually transitioned into higher education after that, and I thought that I would end up as in-house counsel at a college or university. That was sort of my goal when I decided to go to law school. But I'd done a lot of community service work around service learning and students with challenges, and making sure that again we were supporting students. So even when I got into higher education, I worked in a transition program at Rutgers University that was for students who had dropped out of school and were coming back later in life. Some of our former athletes, but a lot who had experienced a lot of the things that we're talking about. And as a dean, you have the opportunity to have a lot of interpersonal relationships with students and conversations around things. So there just seemed to be a sense of bringing all this work together, the things that were interesting to me at the K to 12 level and helping kids, but also some of the things I saw with adults as well who were getting past some of those issues. I mean, honestly, at that point, I wasn't putting it together this work hadn't been done in this space at all. It was just more of a feeling that, hey, there's something here in supporting students and things that we can be doing differently there. So that ultimately led to, deciding to go to law school. In law school, very much focused on education. I wanted to leverage my education background and what I did. And my first job out of law school was with a firm in New Jersey. And I was asked to work on a lot of special education issues. And that's when things really did start to crystallize for me, that there were some connections here.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know, maybe this would be something you could share back with us and we can get out, or you could share on your socials. But like those 10 questions that inform, that you referred to, by two doctors came together for 10 questions. Is that something you could share back with us, or maybe share out and like tag in back to this show on social
Sure.
media?
The ACEs survey. I mean, I want to be clear that work has evolved quite a bit. So those 10 questions were sort of the infancy of all that. And there are a lot of things
Sure.
that aren't necessarily included there, but the three categories they look at are abuse. So have you been exposed to physical abuse, emotional or sexual abuse, neglect, so either physical or emotional neglect, and then household dysfunction, which can be divorce, again, incarceration of a caregiver, mothers, any sort of experience of domestic violence and substance abuse. So those are really the things that they were looking at. And again, you answer those questions, or yes, no questions. You have a score, and that score will indicate, where you are with respect to that ACE scale. And I think the interesting thing about that study, it was 17,000 plus participants. It wasn't really focused just on the inner city population. So this idea that ACEs and adverse childhood experiences generally and trauma can occur anywhere, any zip code. It's not really an urban issue. It's really can run the gamut.
Yeah. I mean, every bucket you just presented there is not there's not like a zip code exclusivity to any of those issues. They are everywhere, as you just said. And the thing that I think I would want to, and I'll get your thoughts on this, I'd want to challenge our listeners. This isn't a pull yourself up bootstraps conversation. Resiliency is, right? Like, that's something you learn, and you learn resiliency, and you can learn resiliency and overcome things. But I'll challenge the thought of, trauma, set it aside, work through it, all that stuff. If you can hack your genetic code for the positive, like health-wise, DNA-wise, muscle physique-wise, then your same genetic code can be affected by things that you didn't have any control over as a child, right? Like we know this, you touched on it, how the mental health aspect of this directly translates to your life and your day. Is that a fair summation of what we're talking about here?
And I think the really important thing with this particular issue as well is just to understand the brain science around this and how it's developed. We know now that there's this concept of neuroplasticity, that our brains are able to kind of rewire themselves with in a similar manner to the way that they're wired when we are experiencing these negative things, if we have those positive supports as well. And I'll go back to the whole idea of having that at least one caring, trusted adult who's there to support. And I think the organizations that have done phenomenal work around this, I'm pretty privileged to be part of the board of the Attachment Trauma Network, which is a national board. And we haven't really talked a lot about trauma at all, or I'm sorry, about attachment at all, but that's another big component here as well. That attachment, the bonds between an infant and the adult caregiver, that can impact that brain development as well, and that's going to manifest itself as trauma and trauma responses. So a lot of what was focused on, particularly initially around trauma, was behavior too. So this idea that behaviors we were seeing that really didn't, they were maladaptive in a school environment. If you think about it, those behaviors make a lot of sense if you're in life and death situations. So if that's the thing that's keeping you alive, you engaging in that sort of behavior anytime you have a stressor in the school environment is going to seem, you're going to fall into that. And it's not a conscious decision. It's really something that's automated the same way we breathe. So this idea of, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response is really hardwired into us. And it's a phenomenal thing. It keeps us alive. And that's why it's built within our conscious and our beings. But when we're in situations that aren't life or death and we're flipping into that mode, you can see how that's going to create problems for you in school, either behaviorally or sometimes even withdrawal, and even cognitively. I mean, there's a lot of brain science now that indicates that, the parts of your brain that are responsible for keeping you alive, that more what they'll refer to as reptilian brain, that part of your brain is developing much more quickly as a result of those, or it's, I should say, really what's happening there is the other parts of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, where we have our executive functioning, our more rational thought, is being depleted as a result of what's going on with the trauma and the trauma response, to put it very simplistically.
Yeah.
Bill, how did you get from working at a law firm in New Jersey here to Lancaster and your work with Apple and Yoast? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So my specialty definitely became education law and represented school districts throughout South Jersey. And interestingly enough, my wife's family, her father worked for UPS, moved all around the country. And for his last post, so to speak, before retirement, he wanted to get as close to Philadelphia, which is where they were originally from, as possible. So he was at the Harrisburg hub and settled in Lancaster. So the idea was to get from New Jersey back to my wife's big family, 7 kids. They're all very close. So trying to get back this way. Had a great opportunity to join a firm, Hartman, Underhill, and Brubaker. Has since dissolved that firm, but became part of that group, that education group. And we actually stayed together. When the firm dissolved, we took that education group to Barley Snyder. We were there for a little while, and then ultimately was able to reunite here at Apple Yoast at the time with some of my former colleagues from Hartman Underhill. So that's that was the journey, so to speak.
So there's founding documents for Gardner's Mattress and More in the office that Ted Brubaker helped us create and author and,
my gosh, that's 15 years ago.
I don't know if I'm using the right legal terms, but they're there. And then
he's a great lawyer. Yeah, one of my former partners. Great guy.
Yeah, and then Apple and Yoast helped me with when I had an unfortunate incident with my older boy's pickup truck and a mechanic, and they helped us settle out and help that situation out, which became a very messy situation very fast. But they were really great at helping me get that organized. So it's interesting how you said the education group. I never thought about how firms have these different modalities And so like you have your team, and I guess you just brought your team as business evolved, partnerships evolved. You just kind of took that team from this area to this group to this group. Is that what I heard?
That's correct. Yeah. So we're sort of in a niche practice area. There aren't a ton of firms that do what we do. And, I think having the education background and having a team that's what they do, you start to understand schools are a little bit different client-wise. Schools are really little cities, so they have all sorts of issues that run the gamut of legal issues. So it's important to have access to attorneys that can do all of that work, but also having a core team of people that really understand the way schools operate, what schools need. It's a 24/7 job often because schools always have very unique situations come up, individual schools, and then when you have a whole stable of schools that you're working with, it can be even more interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I pay attention to schools and, the politics of schools and the funding of schools a decent amount. And I know that a big consternation that exists for schools that some might not understand is there's a tremendous amount of federal legislation, oversight, and requirement from the top. But that requirement, oversight, and legislation comes with next to $0 of funding to support it. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement, and to kind of circle that back, because I think that has an interesting intersection with what we were talking about with trauma-informed practice. So when I was really focused on special education, one of the things I was seeing a lot in reviewing files and working with students and schools to meet those student needs was some of this, trauma background, which did not necessarily qualify an individual for services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal law that governs special education services in public schools. But there was a connection. And I think when this really all started to crystallize and I saw some traction and I definitely think that there was a sort of sea change was around 2006 to 8 when we started to see, and there was one case in particular, Compton Unified Peter P. Case that was a class action lawsuit where the school district was sued on the basis that they were not addressing trauma, community-based trauma, and the trauma students were having to the extent that was necessary in supports, which could in fact lead to disability-based eligibility. So the court wasn't saying that trauma was a disability. They were just for the first time drawing this connection. And I think the reason that happened is because at that point, all of that brain science I had talked about earlier and some of the work that was being done, that was out there enough, and it was about 10 years old really at that point, that there was support for this idea that one could impact the other. So one of the things I started to see in my practice was, that this was an issue. But I think the reason I circled that back to your comment because, at that time I started working with the Pennsylvania School Boards Association and with some groups that were working with the legislature that ultimately got trauma-informed training as part of our school code, so that board members are required to have training, educators are required to have training, and I think that was the first opportunity to do something that's really important for all students. So you're really providing an opportunity to catch all students, even those who necessarily haven't experienced significant trauma in their lives, in a way that also addresses some of that requirement under federal law that you were talking about to meet the needs. So perhaps we were seeing some students over-identified in special education that were really dealing with some of these trauma issues, or the opposite. So we were trying to bring some of that together. So right around that time, we really got a lot of traction on that, and schools really started to look at how can we train people just to do some, because these are low-cost things. These are changing interpersonal relationships. These are changing the way sometimes you structure your school environment, both the physical environment, but also your rules and regulations, and making sure again we're asking those questions and coming through that lens of rather than what's wrong with you, what happened to you, and really trying to get at that, and putting things in place that we, again, try to catch all of those students. Because you see, it's like most things, you're spending the vast majority of your time on a very small population of students, particularly when you are not teaching replacement behavior, you're not engaging students in a way that's going to allow them to regulate themselves, to learn those skills, and just reacting in a way of punishing behavior rather than saying, okay, there's something else going on here. How do we start to get at that? So that was really interesting to see that evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a question and it just went right off the top of my head. So you as the attorney, and you work with schools. So some people listening might think, well, that means you're on the side of the school, and maybe I've felt less than impressed with the way my child's been treated at school. Your approach, your connection to trauma-informed education, your leadership on this topic, do you feel you're functioning more as a bridge between the two parties?
That's certainly what I try to do, and that was a conscious decision with the way we approach practice in that area. And I think most of the attorneys that do what I do, and I understand that connotation, oh, you're the defense attorney for schools, and we certainly are here to vigorously defend our clients when need be. But I think really education is a little bit different space in that ultimately the litmus test is, am I doing what's right for a child? And
Right.
now I'm fortunate. I have great clients who that's really what they're trying to do. But it's that proactive. It's how can I learn a little bit more about this area and apply it to my pedagogy so that I don't have some of these issues with students I'm learning. And it's as much,
Yep.
it's as much a relationship thing as anything else, and people buying in that, there are two parts to the equation of interpersonal relationship. One of the things I'll talk about, when we're doing trainings is, co-regulation and making sure that what you're bringing to that relationship. And because that really what that student needs at that point is to be able to regulate their emotions and their behaviors. But if both sides of that equation are amplified, and you're not gonna get there. So some of it's understanding what you're bringing to that as well, and how you can go about helping that student to what sometimes gets referred to, as top down rather than bottom up thinking. So again, when you have bottom up thinking, you're drawing on that more primitive part of your brain, that survival instinct, whereas the top down is the executive function, the rational sort of your brain. But you can't get there unless you regulate that fear response first.
Yep.
Bill, you mentioned relationships. An organization you have a relationship with, a strong relationship with, is Swan. We mentioned them earlier, and Diana Volo. We've highlighted them on the show a few times, had Diana on a couple times.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about how you became involved with Swan and Diana, and maybe describe a little bit about what you do with them to help them?
Sure. So it goes back to, again, around that time period I was talking about earlier, I guess around the 2000, I guess maybe a little bit later than that, Diana and I met. And really it was just work we were doing. I was working with the school district of Lancaster at that point. We were introduced by people that knew we had mutual interests and concerns about students and what they were experiencing. I think the thing that resonated the most with me was the population of students that Diana was working with, and those who had an incarcerated parent or caregiver, and this idea of using music as well. I mean, I'm a big music fan, and music has been really, really important in my processing my own emotions and responses to things in life. So bringing those two things together to me was amazing. And then when I had the opportunity to actually see the students engage in their activities and visit, I was sold. So that was really the big thing. And then that just opened up an opportunity that I try to really be a connector in this work. So connecting Diana to some of the others who were like-minded at the time. Damaris Rao was the superintendent of the school district of Lancaster. And, I had this crazy idea that, hey, let's get together and create this sort of short snippet video that we can share with school districts and others around this issue. So we did some work on that. We had interviews with all of us, and some snippets of me speaking to schools and doing some trainings, and we put that together. And that was really the idea of recognizing, going back to those R's I talked about earlier, the recognition of the widespread impact of trauma. And definitely before we got to the point where we are, I think now, where schools absolutely have bought into that and know that they programmatically can do things to help. But the idea was we really need to get this out there. So it was great to partner with someone like Diana. She just has, such great compassion and empathy for the students that she's serving, and it was just a natural connection to make.
Yeah. And just to kind of refresh the conversation, so those three buckets of trauma, can you say them again?
Sure. So we're looking at abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction.
Yeah. And so when you think about abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, again, you don't have to look very far. And I'm setting this up this way to ask you this question. This was the question I wanted to ask earlier that I said flew off the top of my head. So we can certainly have kids that check the box in all three, 2 out of 3, 1 out of 3. And that affects really can affect most any learner and any student. All that said, understanding where they're coming from, what's your view on allowing the learner, the student, to get away with behavior because of their past? What's your view there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I look at behavior and discipline is really supposed to be about learning. It's not about punishment. It's not about being punitive. So it's really how you're approaching that. And I think and it's interesting, a lot of what we do in addressing behavior now has come from things we've learned in special education, where students have very particular needs, and teaching replacement behaviors, teaching those skills. Because behavior is a language. I mean, you're trying to communicate something when you're behaving a certain way. And I guess, again, having some of the insight of having experienced some of these things as well, no one wants to be in trouble. No one wants to get in trouble. People want to be successful. So I think when you adopt that lens and you take it more toward, it's not an issue of are we letting people get away with things. It's how are we responding to those behaviors and what's most effective. It's not lowering the bar. It's changing how we're going about teaching, expectations, and what's necessary to be successful both in school and in life. The idea that, and we covered some of this when we talked in that little video I was talking about, the research bears out that this idea of removal discipline really isn't super effective. So when we suspend and expel kids, I mean, there are situations, certainly dangerous situations, where we need to remove students from environments, but this idea that we're somehow going to change maladaptive behaviors by removing students from that setting and putting them at home, which may be dysfunctional as well, where a lot of these things are coming from, doesn't really address that behavior. So you're sort of just spinning your wheels there. And I think that's a big part of the concept, and that it really is a mindset shift, that's how we get where we want to go. So that's the idea of, again, being proactive on that front and making sure that we are addressing things in a way that account for all these issues that we know about now. It's not my phrase. I don't know whose phrase it is and picked it up, but this idea of kids having an invisible backpack of things they bring with them to school, and just recognizing that can be there, and we have to be willing to respond in a way that's going to allow them to adjust those behaviors, modify those behaviors. But I don't think, to your question, again, I don't think it's at all using this as an excuse. That's not at all why I do this work. I think the idea is to help people, and making excuses doesn't help individuals.
Yeah. So we have somebody from Mental Health America of Lancaster County watching. So thank you for watching. We don't know who that is. We just know where they're commenting from. Thanks for watching and sharing your thoughts. I think, Bill, you've said a few things that just really are profound to me. The last one you said was the invisible backpack. So try to think of what's in that backpack that kid's carrying around. As an adult that's in that kid's life in some way or another. You don't have to be an educator. You could be You could be the bus driver. You could be the person at the crosswalk. You could be just somebody in the neighborhood that knows this child, which dovetails into the other point you made about, kids that are experiencing trauma need just one adult to care and maybe be a leader and maybe have interest in them. So take that with what I just said about being that adult in that kid's life. That behavior is a language. I mean, that statement right there transcends educator to student. It's for Bill and in your practice with the people who you work with. Their behaviors are a language to you. It's a language like English is to Chinese and Spanish is to Hungarian. And in here, when we have employer-employee issues, that behavior is a language. I mean, I've never heard it said that way. And I love that you said it. And then the last one is where you first started. And, what was the first thing? Bill, what was the first profound thing you shared on the show? You shared a lot of great ones.
You bring up the adults, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as well. There's a component of this. I mean, we know, and there's been a lot of really good work done with first responders in this area, that the people that are responding to trauma as well, or others experiencing trauma, there's this vicarious trauma, so that you're taking on the issues that you're working with. So it's really important as part of having a trauma-informed system. And this really is there's a need to do a systemic look at this and having a systemic approach, but making sure that those adults are in a good space as well, and we're supporting them. So that's some of the work I've been doing recently. I just had an opportunity to talk with the IU13 in one of their programs for educational leadership. And we talked a lot about how those leaders can go about being trauma informed in their whole approach to their interactions and their staff's interactions with students, but also interactions with each other and supporting staff as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, really is.
Bill, one of the questions we always like to ask our guests, relates to community and how the community can help and support. Whether that's help support, obviously, Swan and Diana. I know there's an event coming up. I'd like to talk about the event, but also supporting your firm and supporting this concept of trauma-informed education. How can the community help out? Is it being more educated about the concept?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, absolutely. And it's interesting, as you progress through this, I remember talking about this with a group of lawyers the first time I ever, it was a big national program, and there were, several hundred attorneys, and it was the first time I kind of shared some of my own life experience and how that intersected with this stuff. And it was a mixed reaction. I think some people thought, oh, this is kind of esoteric. And this was prior to that shift in that really that one big case, and then a shift in this. And it's been fascinating though to watch the evolution. There's Dr. Bruce Perry does a lot of work in the trauma space, and he published a book with Oprah Winfrey a couple of years ago now. And people really started to focus on this a little more. And there are a lot of great books. Nadine Burke-Harris wrote a book called The Deepest Well. Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, which is probably a deep dive into trauma. But I think, people being a little more educated around it. We have some great, I always tell people wherever I am that we have some of the most amazing community benefit organizations in Lancaster. One of the best things I ever did when I moved here was get involved in Leadership Lancaster and really understand the community a little bit better. And ended up being on that board for a little bit as well, which exposed me to even greater number of community benefit organizations. But organizations like SWAN or organizations like MHMA, who somebody commented earlier, they're a whole host. I was 15 years, I think, on the Aaron's Acres board of directors. I don't know if you're familiar with Aaron's Acres, but
we're very familiar. Yep.
Yeah. So
we've had them on the show.
I still, am very closely involved. I haven't been able to really let that go. It was a passion, and it kind of balances out the day-to-day legal work with trying to give back. I mean, that's really important to me. I know it's really important to this community. So I think people just tuning in and paying attention to this issue and understanding that there are some really interesting and important things going on in schools. I know we see a lot right now that's negative. I am out, anywhere from 2 to 4 nights a week, sometimes in board meetings, and those can be very tense. Through the pandemic and even after a little bit, we're seeing a lot of back and forth around cultural things in schools. But I think programs like this that everyone can get behind, that are just good for all kids, but really help us. I think and if you're coming at this from a cost standpoint as well, I think they're very cost effective. I mean, some of the things I'm talking about, that change in approach, these aren't massive investments of resources, or a drain on things. It's supportive of the other initiatives that you have, and getting people to understand that our approach is so important with being able to have a huge impact on these issues.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I mean, to your point of cost effective and at the same time being impactful, I mean, if we take what you said, where behavior is a language, and that behavior is outrage and stress and just lashing out, and that behavior manifests physically in a classroom, and now that affects the whole classroom of 28 or 30 kids. If the teaching community, and this isn't to say the teaching community isn't doing this, but if they can understand that question of, well, what happened, as opposed to what's wrong, and now that behavior becomes different, now all 30 kids are just excited to learn.
Absolutely.
And that makes that hour of time in that day go better. And then maybe that next period, the one or two other kids, there's a different focus, and that repairs itself. And suddenly the day just it gets back to what teaching was meant to be, and what teachers want it to be, where they get to impact the lives of kids, and they're that adult in that kid's life that kid needs the most.
Well, one of the things is we see people trying to change individuals' behaviors without really understanding where those behaviors come from and why they exist. And I think to me, that's a big, big part of it. And, understanding that these aren't volitional acts of, hey, I want to be disrespectful, or I'm not interested in learning, but there's this automated sort of reaction to having that level of stress and being dysregulated that you aren't able to control. I think so. That's a big part of just understanding, I think, this as well.
Bill, there's so much we could talk about in regards to this subject. We are kind of running out of time here, but we do want to talk about the SWAN event that you are keynote speaker at. July 24th, I believe.
Yes,
is the event. We'll put some information up on the screen, but tell us about that event and what you'll be speaking about there.
Sure. So the participants will have an opportunity to see the kids perform, which is always, to me, the highlight of the show, and amazing. In addition to myself, Nate Dean will also be speaking, and Nate will be able to talk about a film that Brave the Dark that he is involved in, that at some point I think people from this community will be really excited about and have an opportunity to see. And then we'll hear a little bit more about some of the initiatives from SWAN as well. And there's a silent auction, and it's always a great event. So I'm looking forward to that. It's been great watching SWAN grow and the work that Diana has done. And I think it's just such important work that, we want to get people to support that in any way that we can.
Yeah. And there's the opportunity for those in the community. If you go to the page we have on the screen, swanforkids.org/events/summer celebration 24, there's an opportunity for you to sponsor this event. So you can do things like buy a meal for the kids, which is, I think, like 3 or 4 pizzas. You can buy instruments, which is a few $100, and that gets drums and some other things in the kids' hands for music instruction. So if you're not able to make it out that night, but you love the idea of this form of education, here we go. You can buy for $10. You can buy a flower arrangement. $20 music lessons books. You take care of putting on the event, table linens, and covering the cost of silverware. The Herr family, Stuart Herr, who we know from the mattress business, because his family had Serta Mattress here in Lancaster for the longest time. The farm at Eagles Ridge, that's where this is hosted. So, they generously support Swan's event. So this is a community effort to bring this event to life. And if you're connected to this and you've liked anything of what Bill has said and this show, we would love to know that, a little extra went towards this event from this show through those sponsorship opportunities. So it's right there on the page that we have on screen, and you can just choose to donate or whatever makes sense for you. Yep. Bill, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your time and your talents with everyone. We have your firm's information here on the show notes. I'll give you the opportunity for a blatant self-promotion of Apple, Yoast, and Z right now, if you would like to take it. It's perfectly allowed.
Sure. I mean, I think I'm biased, but our firm traces its roots back to 1883. So we've been a staple, seventh oldest law firm, seventh oldest business in Lancaster County I believe I have that right.
Wow.
Wait, did you say seventh oldest business?
Oldest law firm, seventh oldest business.
Wow.
And we've done some exciting things. I'm happy to be part of it. Our managing partner, Jeff Ouellette, won a Chamber Award as Small Business Person of the Year a year ago. I think it's a year ago now, maybe two. But yeah, we've had some great recognition. We have some great attorneys here. It's been great growth. So I think the thing I value the most is we have some people that really care about the community and infuse that into their work, and that's what gives me the opportunity to do things like this and work with great people like Diana. So it's very rewarding.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Well, I'm glad to be connected to you. Thank you for taking the time to be here on our show, talk about all the expertise you bring to the community, helping out kids that have needs, that have issues, and really they are our most vulnerable people in our society, because they're that next generation, and we need them for this whole thing to continue on. We need them to be able to be successful, and you're here helping make that happen with your work, and we appreciate you. Looking forward to seeing you later this month in 3 weeks, I guess it is.
Sounds good.
That's crazy.
3 short weeks.
It was my pleasure. I really appreciate you highlighting this issue, and we'll continue to work hard and support kids, and I think it makes us all better and stronger.
Yep. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, not to put you on the spot, but we have just a few questions about you,
okay,
Bill Z, if that's all right. We call it our connection cocktail.
Okay.
So we'll go real quick. What's your favorite part of the Lancaster community?
Wow. I really like the food scene here and the energy around the food scene. And I think that was because when I moved here from New Jersey, it was a concern of mine, which I moved here in 2000, and I've just seen some really big expansion, and there's a lot of great options. And yeah, that's probably the thing I really like.
Food is one of the most discussed things about Lancaster County on this show, I think.
And I'm a visual good representation of the Lancaster food scene here.
Hey, Bill, do you have any upcoming travel plans? Like summer vacation, fall vacation, anything like that?
Actually, I've done a few trips recently, so not anything big coming up now. I had an opportunity to visit a friend in New Mexico, so that was pretty cool. First time I'd ever been to that part of the country. I've been fortunate that I've been able to get to a lot of the areas of the country, so it was really cool to go there. So
yeah, nice, very good.
And so when you were younger, what did you think you would be when you grew up?
Wow, so that definitely evolved over time. I think initially I thought I'd be a chef. I had interest in food, and I had we talk about resilience and building things. My grandmother was really important. She was kind of that big rock for me, and she was a cook, and I just remember growing up around, she was just a great cook, and that had an influence on me. So I thought I'd probably do that, and then I think as I moved along a little bit, I definitely thought I'd be a teacher, and that's what I ended up for a little while.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Thanks for sharing.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. Appreciate you. We'll see you July 24th at Swan's Celebration 2024 event. We had that link here on the screen. We'll get that out in the notes. Just again, as a call to action, we often ask people to support the people who are on our show. If you could donate to some of those sponsorship opportunities for Swan's 2024 Summer Celebration, I know Bill would like that, and we would love that too. So, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate you today. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See you.
So, another great one.
They're all great shows.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, but like that one really touches every part of our community. That's not just a school district of Lancaster thing. That's a Elko to Solanco to Manheim Township to Hempfield to, Cocalico. I know I'm from Lidditz. I know, well, Warwick would be.
Right.
There's not a Lidditz school district. It's Warwick, but it's every school district, and it's every county and every state in the nation. So, this is a good one to put on repeat. This is a good one to save, good one to pass along.
Share.
Yeah.
Friends, family,
I think, be that adult for kids that are in your neighborhood. Try to be that person. If you coach sports, take that extra time. If you know a teacher and they're struggling, maybe point them to some of Bill's work, point them to what Swan's doing, and just see that there's different opportunity out there for other people. So that's that. To that point of Bill's, one of Bill's buckets, the dysfunction in the home and neuroplasticity of the brain, all of that directly ties to sleep. So, imagine a child if they're not able to sleep at night because there's abuse in the home, there's yelling in the home, the street's loud, there's, their bedroom's right at the street front and there's cars all night, any number of things. That's going to affect them. And the quality of sleep is something that I've really been focusing on lately. And, so I just challenge you, focus on the sleep quality you get. So this transcends not just the amount of hours you get, but the environment in which you sleep. Is it quiet? Is it temperature neutral? Is it comfortable? Does it promote you going to sleep quickly and staying asleep? So sleep environment tremendously helps, and then the amount you get. So try to be in that 6 to 7.5 hour window. That's best. If you're of our age, if you're younger, you want to be on that 9 hour to maybe 10.5 hour length of time. We give you tips like that and more in our Sleep Better book, which we'll mail to you for free. You go to gardnersmattressandmore.com/sleep-better.
Nicely done. So testimonial time. Gardner's Mattress and More. We've got a handwritten testimonial that came in here from Corey and Bethany here in Lancaster. And this is relevant because it is the holiday week here. We got July 4th coming up here on Thursday. And as most mattress businesses and furniture and home related product businesses do during holiday weekends, the traffic spikes, right? Business spikes. Good thing for us, but it does feel busier here in the showroom often. And Corey and Bethany purchased during Memorial Day, and they referenced that here in their testimonial. They said they came in during a busy Memorial Day weekend sale, but still felt that Chad tried to walk us through the process of purchasing a mattress that would meet our sleep needs well. So despite being busy holiday weekend, they felt that Chad still gave them the attentiveness to their sleep needs and their desire to find a mattress that met those sleep needs. They felt that he did a good job with that. So no question, we do get busier during holiday weekends. But as this person referenced here, we do try to make every effort to give the same level of attentiveness as if you were the only person in the customer or in the showroom. So,
and the easy way to solve that problem is to shop now.
That's very true. Skip
the lines. Come on in on a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday morning or, Sunday afternoon. On our sales page, we have I, of all people in this company, did the little computer coding, and you got a little countdown timer of when the sales end. So you're not going to miss anything now through July 9th.
That's true.
It's right there on the website. So you can check it out. But that's the way to avoid that. You don't all have to come on July 4th. We welcome everybody to come on July 4th. But you can do the burgers and the dogs and the celebrate our victory over the British with your.
Look, it's still working.
Yeah, it is still working. It's a miracle.
It's counting down.
Yeah, I did that, which is if you knew that around here, you would say
You've
no
come
way.
a long way.
Yeah, right. But yes, it is a great time to invest in your sleep. There's a lot of reasons to have great sleep. Bill touched on that a little bit today. I expanded on it a little bit. And sleep's important. It's that third leg of a life well lived. You've got diet, exercise, and sleep. If you can execute those three things well, you'll live a happy, fulfilled life for sure. And we want to be a part of that. So come check us out this week, gardenersmattressandmore.com. I think that's the show.
That's a wrap.
Thank you to Bill from Apple, Yost, and Z, and thank you to Swan for helping our community out. You'll get to see him at the summer celebration. Please check out that event, Swan's Summer Celebration 2024 event. If you can in any way support it, we would love to know that you did that. So thank you.
And thanks to the people that chimed in.
That's right.
During the show.
Thank you, Shelby from Mental Health America of Lancaster County. We'll see you there as well. And thank you to Betsy at Acorn Acres for all she does. And I guess the wildlife hears the fireworks.
Yes, they do.
Happy Fireworks Week. Please plan to keep all 10 fingers. Okay.
Yes.
Be safe. Have a great week. And we'll see you next week on Lancaster Connects.